Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's seminar on measuring well-being. I'm James Foster, Professor of Economics and International Affairs at the George Washington University, welcoming you to our seminar today. I'm sitting here somewhere in the foothills of the Catalina Mountains, north of Tucson, Arizona, roughly 2,300 miles west of my usual location in Washington, D.C., and about 5,300 miles west of Oxford. This seminar series is being organized by OFI at Oxford and IIP at the George Washington University. And I wanted to thank both teams for all their hard work in creating the series. Today's event features Rizwan Al-Haq of OFI presenting a paper entitled Proposing a Gross Wellbeing Index, Evidence from Chad, Comoros, and Iraq. Last week, Dr. Putu Nati joined us from Indonesia to present her paper Beyond Poverty, Mapping Multidimensional Wellbeing in Indonesia. And next week, Mario Bigheri from Florence, Italy, will present Measurement of Integral Human Development, Multidimensional Wellbeing Indicator in Malawi. All the papers in this series use the Alcar-Foster methodology to create a policy-friendly well-being index that goes beyond GDP. I see that Savina has joined us today from, where is it? Thailand? Hello,
Yes,
Savina.
6,084 miles away.
Okay, excellent. And I understand that Rizwan is there in Oxford's Queen Elizabeth House, hopefully ready to go. If so, then please do tell us about well-being in Chad, Comoros, and Iraq. Rizwan.
Oh, 1 second, sorry. I'm just writing in the chat. If everyone could put any questions, I see we have a hand raised from a participant, but the only way we can see those is in the chat. So if anyone has any questions there or they can't hear loud enough, please let us know. Thank you. And I'll just share screen.
Okay, thanks.
There you are now. Using these.
Yes.
Ah, there we go.
Thanks.
Rizwan.
Thanks, James, and hello, everybody. And so today's topic is proposing gross wellbeing index evidence from Chad, Comoros, and Iraq. And just to give you a bit, what's the motivation of these studies? It was presented in Rome in February this year. So the Pact of Future in 2024 was signed by the UN member states that we should go beyond the GDP. And now the Beyond GDP report is published, and it gives a framework measuring progress across peace, well-being, equity, and sustainability. So if we look at it, peace is a very holistic concept. Well-being is the upper side of the trajectory of human development. Equity includes poverty, which includes multidimensional poverty as well. So that's the lower bound as well. And sustainability is overall aim of the development. So we can see that both well-being and equity are there. But now we have lots of poverty measures, but for a universal or global well-being measure, can we look at it? So this is the main motivation. And what's well-being? So well-being has been in the research agenda for quite a bit of time. And many disciplines have their own way of operationalizing this concept. Economics, psychology, sociology, public health, public policy. So they all look into the well-being in their own way. But what we can imply that now, not only the GDP, but it's beyond GDP, looking at multidimensional concepts is much more, in a way, it has an acceptance in not only one or a couple of disciplines, but many disciplines in social sciences. So the proposed gross well-being index is embedded in sense capability approach. And so it has different dimensions: health, education, living standards, subjective well-being, and security. I'll come to that in a bit, but it is how we would have to, we are proposing to measure it is on the gross national happiness index of Bhutan. So it will be closely linked with that. The basic concepts would be based on the GNHI. So Ellicott-Foster methodology is the backbone of GNHI. Deprivations are counted in the MPI, but here for the GWI, the gross well-being index, we will be looking at the sufficiencies. The flip side of deprivations. What we are proposing here, that if we look at the data sets, because the idea is that this is just for 3 countries, but can we have a universal global well-being index? Now, do we have data? This is the first question. And the answer is yes, we have questions in mix, which is covered around 50 countries across the globe. And in mix, we have questions on subjective well-being, and some of the questions are related to security as well. But these questions are asked to men and women 15 to 49 years of age. So the first thing here with this particular GWI is that it has to be, we can compute it at the household level, but the best way would be to compute it at the individual level. So in this study, we are computing it at the individual level. So whatever we will be saying, that will be just appropriate, relevant for the respondents, the men and women. They were actually asked. Now there are positive sides to that and the downsides as well. The positive side is when we are asking the questions about a respondent, about the whole household, then there might be, most of the things might be accurate, which are facts, like, for example, how many rooms are there, education status. Bits might be a bit off, like for health. But when it comes to the subjective nature of the questions, how do you feel? What's your level of satisfaction in life? How do you see previous year or the year ahead? So the person can only answer about himself or herself. So that's why this particular measure is based on, will be on the individual level. Nested weights are used. All the dimensions, within the dimensions of indicators will have same weights. And based on the sufficiency cutoffs, they will be categorized as sufficient or insufficient. So these are the 3 countries which we have selected. So Chad, Comoros, they are from Sub-Saharan Africa, and Iraq is in Arab states. And if we look at the global MPI values, there is a stark difference. I mean, Chad is, hugely poor. 0.517 is the MPI value. Comoros is quite better off than Chad, but Iraq is it has the lowest MPI across the 3 countries. And we have tried also to have those, to select those countries which have mix and which have the recent data, and of course, that the subjective well-being questions are there. So that's why these 3 countries were selected. And this is just to give you a disclaimer that this is a study, work in progress, and most of the is try to get your input on that to improve the paper and how to move forward. Just to give you a background, this is the global MPI dimensional indicator and cutoffs. So we know that in global MPI, there are 3 dimensions: health, education, and living standard. Nutrition and child mortality in health, years of schooling and school attendance in education, and cooking, fuel, sanitation, drinking water, electricity, housing, assets. They are well known, so I won't go into the detail. Now the question arises because we are trying to relate the global MPI with the well-being index. Now the question arises, the well-being is at the other side of the ladder. And when the global MPI actually computes the acute poverty, which is on the far side. So how can we combine them? So this is a big question. And that's why, we raised the bar in a recent study, which will be published recently in the moderate MPI. So we have moderate MPI, which is actually raising the bars. So we are now trying to raise the bar and relate that to the well-being. And that's it. This is what we have. So for health, in the global MPI nutrition, we actually include obesity as well with undernourished. And for child mortality in health in global MPI, we include maternal health. So there are certain criteria that should meet in a household that for that particular person to be sufficient if that person is living in a household. For years of schooling, we have raised the bar from 6 to 9 and also made it gendered. Because in the global MPI, if someone who has the minimum years of schooling, the whole household is non-deprived. If none of them then has the minimum years of schooling, then the household is deprived. Here we say that one member from male member, one female member should have the minimum years of schooling for that household to be sufficient. Child school attendance, we raised the bar, the eligible children from the age at which they would complete 8 years to 10 years. And then we have another school lag, or we name it age appropriate attendance, basically. So none of the school age child is having at least 2 years of lag. Then the household will be sufficient. So this is actually a new indicator which was introduced in the moderate MPI. So as I said, that it's not we are embedding the subjective well-being dimensions in the global MPI, rather we are embedding the moderate MPI indicators. And then for the living standards, we raise the bar for drinking water, that it should be safe piped water in the premises for the household to be sufficient. For sanitation, it should be flush toilets, which are not shared. For cooking fuel, the household should not use solid fuel, including kerosene, to be sufficient. For electricity, it was a bit difficult to raise the bar, so we included internet. The household should have internet and should have electricity. In housing material, we raised the bar for flooring, and also we included the overcrowding. In assets, it was, we raised the number of assets, minimum number of assets from 1 to 2, from 2 to 3, and we included washing machine and bank account in the list of. So there were certain changes in that in the moderate MPI, and it was a superset to the global MPI as well. Then we included 2 dimensions, life satisfaction and security. And life satisfaction, it was that we have life satisfaction ladder. The people were scored on a particular ladder, and the higher the score, the more satisfied they are. So if the score is 7 or above, then the person is sufficient. Life situation as compared to the previous year, and life situation, what they are expecting in the next year. So if they think that it is improved or it will be better in the next year, then that person is sufficient. And then security, we have 2 questions, robbery and assault. If the person did not, was not a victim of robbery or was not a victim of assault in the last year. So the reference period is last year. So these are in the indicators. So because in the global MPI, we normally have most of the indicators are at a household level. I mean, do you have someone in the household, minimum years of schooling or child school attendance? And as I said, that for this particular DWI, we are focusing on the adults, the individuals. So if the individual is living in those households, then the person will be deprived, or like what we are saying, sufficient in this particular DWI. So these are the uncensored sufficiency headcount ratios. So as we know that Chad is the poorest, and Comoros in between, and Iraq is better off. So we can see that for all the global MPI indicators, if I may say, or moderate MPI indicators, we can see the trend here. But for life satisfaction, all 3 questions, we can see that Chad is better off than Comoros, and Iraq is again at the higher side. So now the Chad is better off than Comoros. So here we can see that a new dimension is becoming, we are getting new information out of it. And same is the case with robbery and assault. We can see that the differences are not that stark, which we are observing for example, for nutrition or maternal health or for education indicators. So robbery and assault are also giving us more information about what the situation is around the uncensored sufficiency. So these are just the number of persons who are sufficient in particular indicators without any censoring. So these are the numbers for the DWI for these two countries. As we can see from the list of indicators, the weights, we can see that yes, because most of the weights are coming from the moderate MPI sort of things. So definitely we will have the same trend that Iraq is better off. 0.896 is the GWI, Comoros 0.755, and for Chad it's the lowest, 0.497. And incidence of people experiencing well-being. So again, 2/3 of the people in Iraq are experiencing well-being, around half in Comoros, and 1 in 10% in Chad. And the K cutoff is 66% for the sufficiency. I'll go to this next slide. So the basic thing, idea is that we are observing almost the same trend. Yet for the uncensored ones, there was some difference. And if we look at the relative contribution to indicators to DWI, so we can see that for Chad, the newly included indicators, they have higher contribution as compared to other countries, Comoros and Iraq. So this is regional DWI for Chad. Now I'm coming to focusing on Chad only. So we can see that for most of the regions, it's the same, apart from the very small region. It's very difficult name to pronounce. The Jamanas, perhaps. And if you look at the desegregated DWI versus global MPI, so the global MPI is again at the individual level. So we can see that the regions are on the same. The darker the color is, it means it has higher global MPI, and for the lighter color for the DWI is the smallest DWI. So we can see the same trend. Those regions which were better off in global well-being index, they are worse off in global MPI. I mean, the numbers are higher numbers in a way. So these are, as I said, that we have, the questions are for male and female individually. So we can look at the regional DWI for Chad by gender. And we can see that there are 2 examples for Chari and Salamat. So we can see that in Chari, female GWI is lower than the male GWI. And for Salamat, it's the other way around, female GWI is better. So if we look at their uncensored sufficiency scores, so we can see that for most of the other indicators, it's almost the same trend. But for life satisfaction, women are better off in Salamat, and Chari in men are better off than women. For robbery and assault, they are almost equal. So this is for Comoros. We have the same trends. I won't go into the detail. These are regional DWI for Comoros because we don't have that much differences in Comoros and Iraq. Again, here we don't find any differences in gender in Comoros. These are the regions for Iraq. Because I want to have more time for the discussion. And again, the regional differences are not great. So what are the challenges and the next steps? So I'm really looking for some answers into that. That well-being leaders highlight important nuances of lived experience, but their subjective nature and contextual nature complicate cross-country comparisons. So the first question, which I'm really trying to answer that, should we really have a cross-country analysis for subjective, well-being index, which is based on the subjective answers? Because it's very, as I said earlier, that for this particular study, we focused not on the households, but at the individuals, because the subjective questions can be answered for that person's life only. So this is the first question. Is there, I mean, relevant to have? So I'm trying to, these are the next steps we have to look into that. So if the answer is yes, then we can perhaps go for all the countries for which we have data in mixed subjective well-being, and then have for a bunch of countries analysis on these lines. And for these countries, I'm also working on it, and we'll extend the analysis. And then the DWI at individual or versus household level. So I think it's very clear that it should be at the individual level, because subjective nature of questions can also be answered by for that person only. And then the constraints of mix, I mean, incomplete country coverage, as I said earlier, that not all mixed countries have these sections. And the well-being questions are very limited to cognitive life satisfaction, because if you go into the studies in psychology, so they really have a distinction between the cognitive life satisfaction and the emotions. So that's why the questions are very much related to life satisfaction. How do you feel about in a life satisfaction in ladder? And then what do you think about the last year's satisfaction, and what do you think about? So these are the constraints. So I would, I would like to have the opinion on that as well, that whether the analysis should be extended and have for a bunch of countries, and we can further go in-depth analysis at what level we can go. Thanks.
Great. Thank you so much, Rizwan. I really appreciate it. Okay, so let's start off with some questions here. First off, I'll check to see whether we might have some in the Q&A, which I don't quite see it yet, and so I therefore turn it over to Sabina Al-Khair. Otherwise, I'll be happy to ask a few. You let me know, Sabina.
I'll start off, and it'd be great to hear yours. So first of all, this is very interesting. I think it's interesting to use data from the mix. I think it's interesting to go down to the household level, and then to go into the moderate MPI, and to use the gendered components, and see the composition and how it's different and the significance of it. So I think there's a lot in there to digest. And I think the results for Iraq, you went through them very quickly, so I couldn't see them very well. I guess one question was the happiness or sufficiency cross-dimensional happiness cutoff at 66%. There are 5 dimensions, and they are equally weighted. And so I wondered, in terms of intuitively, about having a cutoff that would be 79% or 60%, or something that would be more aligned. But it's not a big deal because the variables have different weights. But that was a question. I wondered, Rizwan, if you could put up the map either of Chad or of Iraq, of global MPI and well-being. I can't see it, Maya.
No, I'm just,
Oh,
I have to share the screen.
okay, great. So what struck me is that the dark regions on the left are the poorest regions by the global MPI. And similarly, the dark regions on the right have the lowest GWI. And so they agree on the 3 dark regions in the Chad map on the right. But there are other regions that are among the poorest, but are not dark, that have higher levels of well-being, although they are among the poor. So reading the numbers, the upper right hand is 0.660 of an MPI. So that's really very high, but it has a higher well-being measure. And then you look at the 2 lightest regions in the well-being measure, and one has quite a low poverty level. But in the other one, the poverty is 0.572 in the upper middle. And so we're seeing that poverty and well-being don't tell the same story, that the relationships between them are a little bit distinct. And in the lower left hand, where the red dot is, that lighter region has high well-being, in fact, the highest in Chad, but it has middle level of poverty. So I think that that's a value added that could be teased out more, and look at the indicator compositions of the regions with mismatch and see to what extent the new indicators of subjective well-being or violence are leading to the change in ranks, and to what extent it is raising the bar with the sufficiency cutoffs of the moderate MPI. But in any case, I think that's really quite interesting. And I believe I saw similar patterns for Iraq, but it went by a little bit too quick for me. But I think that that would be quite interesting. Yes. So you see the darkest blue, which is the poorest region, isn't distinctive from the others around it. So that the poverty map and the well-being map sort of agree in some regions, but don't agree closely in others. And so I think there's quite a lot of scope for looking at the disparity between an acute poverty measure, the global MPI, and a moderate poverty measure, and then adding the well-being indicators. So yeah, whether you look at the percent contributions or the composition of the different measures, however you do it, I think that would be an interesting story to draw out. And then similarly on the gendered disaggregation, none of the results were statistically significant, but you pointed out the subjective differences, the one you just passed, between the two regions in Chadi and Salamat, where the subjective questions for women were in one direction versus the other. And I wanted to know if those differences were statistically significant. But there were also differences in both, in that men were better off in many of the poverty variables. And so it was a little bit extra surprising, but I saw that in both, for example, females were better off in assets, which was puzzling. Or is it housing materials? Can't quite see vertically. So that did suggest that there were some disparities that I was curious about, because if it's a household measure, except for the subjective indicators, then is it the case that the subjective indicators are driving the visual disparities in the other indicators? Is it that they're not statistically significant, or what was going on there? But I thought, again, that that's really interesting to pull out. Finally, I thought it would be, I think you have this somewhere, but knowing how many countries of mix have these questions would be very interesting. Of the 40 or 55 countries with mixed surveys, how many have these subjective and victimization or violence questions? That would be interesting to know. What is the scope for extending this? Thank you so much. Oh, sorry, one more thing. If you looked at the global MPI, Chad and Iraq were very close together. And Chad was very, very poor in Iraq, and Comoros were close together. But when you looked at the well-being measure, they were more evenly spaced. And so Comoros was certainly a lot closer to Chad and further away from Iraq. And I found that that was quite interesting, that well-being brought out a lot of differences between Comoros and Iraq that the global MPI was not making visible. So yeah, those are my comments. Over. Any questions?
Well, hello. Any questions there in Queen Elizabeth House?
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation. My question was on the data source. Is there a reason why you chose the mix other than other available data source?
Yeah. James, you want me to respond?
Definitely.
Okay. So as I said earlier, that we are looking for some if it is possible to have a global sort of, well-being measure. So mix gives us an opportunity, as Sabina said, that it has around 50 countries which has mix. So that's why for cross country analysis, that would be much more realistic to focus only on mix. Apart from that, we might have some other surveys, but mix, when we use the standardized survey, so we can then compare the countries quite very well. So that's why we chose mix. And as I said earlier, that these are the countries for which we have recent data, and secondly, we have the subjective well-being or questions on security was there. So because that's the reason for choosing these countries. And this is just to get a prototype what's going on and whether to extend that to have that analysis for other countries. And James, just one minute, I would like to respond just one thing on Sabina's comments. Yes, if you look at Sabina on the GWI, the range is very close. On 0.40 to 0.6 in the legend, but actually there was a mistake as well. But the thing is that the range is very small. So it was also a challenge for me how to make the legends or how to compare them in a graph where we have, for example, for the global MPI, the range is around 0.35. And for GWI, the range is around, it's not that great. So that was one of the reasons that I'm still looking into that, how to make it more visible to show that those regions which are higher in global well-being index, they are better off. They have the lower global MPI.
But isn't that interesting? If the disparity, when you include subjective and violence, is less, that suggests that some of the poorest places have more subjective. I don't know, but it is interesting if the disparity is less. Of course, the scales are not comparable, but it is an interesting observation. Sorry.
Yeah, Sabina, you're absolutely right. And as I said, that if you look at uncensored sufficiency headcount ratios, so that's why, because for example, if you look at Chad and Comoros, so they are, the trend is almost, the pattern is almost flip side of each other for life satisfaction versus other indicators. And that's why I think that it is actually compensating. The life satisfaction responses are better off perhaps in the poorest regions. So that's why they are somehow compensating the moderate or global MPI numbers. Yes, but I think that it's very, that's why I was looking into that and to go beyond just these three countries, looking for other countries as well. That might be, I think, that very interesting. I totally agree with you, Sabina.
Is there another question in Oxford? Not hearing any. Let me just jump in then with a couple of my own. First of all, I noticed that the subjective well-being indices or indicators were sometimes a measure of anticipation or reporting changes. It strikes me that if you're reporting changes in one variable, or expected changes, it's often useful to report expected changes in others. So, and in fact, some of the differences that you see there may be from the expectations of things changing or the direction of things changing, as opposed to, the level of well-being of people. So I wanted to make that comment first. And I echo what Sabina said, that the action really is, in explaining the graphs that you put out, the action really is sort of two marginal changes, one from acute to moderate poverty and from moderate poverty to adding in variables. So that's a neat way. The problem is the order of which way you do it matters. If you added in variables first, well, of course, you wouldn't have acute. But if you get my point, the order would matter if you could, in fact, think through what acute would mean in that instance. In the case where you're adding in subjective well-being and also security, I might add, one question that arises is, despite the fact that I tend to focus on and desire equal weights, equal meaning nested equal weights. In the current situation, I am kind of curious whether there might be justification for having somewhat lower weights on subjective well-being or on security, or in combining the two. It just is a matter of the extent to which you believe that the indicators are really you're confident in what they're saying. And if you look at security, of course, uh, anytime you ask people whether they've been assaulted or, been robbed, the percentage is usually so low that it'll give you insignificant results in many occasions. So that makes it a little bit less interesting. Some other places I've seen where they ask, and I'm not sure whether Mix has a statement about that, are you aware of such going on in your area as opposed to you? And sometimes that's a bit more interesting to the researcher. I agree with the idea. I mean, was it statistically significant? The flipping, that's a really great example, a great question. I'm also interested about maybe is there a case for reporting differences across regions? Because in one region you see it's going one way, in one region well, it could be because women are reporting more in one versus the other, and that can be the case that some regions have greater empowerment for women to respond to their questions in an appropriate way, saying, here's how my life is not that great, or here's how my life is that great. I'd be curious to hear your response to that if you have one. Yeah, so I'm going to stop there and see if there's some responses you can give me, and then if there are some other questions that have piled into the online group or to the people in Oxford. Proceed, Rizwan.
Thanks, James. Always pleasure to listen to you and your comments. So to the last one, I mean, as I pose the question myself, that this is a big question, that whether when we are having a cross-country analysis, should we really go into within the regions of the countries? Because the aim of having a cross-country analysis is altogether different than having a country-focused analysis, because then that is for policymakers looking into that from a very different angle. So then combining the cross-country versus going into the regions, that was just puzzling me, that definitely we can do that and we can look into that. So I'm pretty sure that for security, for example, for robbery and assault, there might be some regions which have security challenges. The numbers might be quite, the sufficiency numbers might be quite low for those particular regions. And I totally agree with you that we have to look into that. And there is a lot of things which are still pending. I have to look at as Sabina said, that regional level composition is one of them. Then at the regional level, looking at the uncensored versus censored numbers. But the main thing is that whether we are planning to have analysis combining other countries as well. And then when we have that, then the focus is totally different than focusing on a particular country and going into the regions. So that was a bit puzzling, because it will be a huge ask to not only to have analysis within the countries, but within the regions as well. And on the life satisfaction, the life satisfactions are, there are different types of questions for well-being. But when we come to the life satisfaction, they are basically from the from psychology, that they ask the question, the ladder which is there, that how satisfied you are, or what is your futuristic, or how do you see your last year. So these are from that particular discipline, and that's how they ask the questions about the comparisons, that how do you see yourself after 1 year. And sometimes they ask the question in totality, how do you see your life? So these are the questions. That's why they call it a cognitive aspect of the well-being in psychology, and it has a vast temporal reference period rather than emotions. So, but we are focusing on mix, and the mix has focus on this particular life satisfaction angle only. So. Thanks for your comments, and if there's any other comment I might remember.
Oh, it's more just wondering about the value of combining subjective indicators with objective indicators. When you look at, and when we're doing comparisons between the global MPI and the GWI, and we're seeing these sort of confusions, but we're comparing acute with essentially a version of moderate MPI that may or may not be driven by people's attitudes reflected in life satisfaction. I mean, I struggle to understand the value of just comparing either the acute poverty of the global MPI, a moderate poverty measure, and just a separate subjective set of indicators that you might find in an opinion poll or in something looking specifically at subjective happiness. Do you have any, based on your journey with this, do you have any particular personal views on that? Yeah.
You're asking James.
Or indeed James or Sabina. Just how do we make this case, as I represent the communications community, how do we make this case to people about the value added of combining subjective with objective indicators?
I mean,
Sabina, go ahead.
no, please, I cannot speak when you are James, please.
No, I was saying, I was pushing it to Sabina, since she's been thinking about this also quite deeply. Go ahead, Sabina.
So, I mean, I think that that's in a sense what these papers are doing is exploring tentatively what is the value added of combining them. I think one of the reasons is that most governments now do collect subjective indicators and use them in well-being. And the question is, what are good uses of these data? And the jury is out. I think it needs a lot more work. I did have a question whether expectations of change next year would reflect hope, James, or anybody on the call, because I think there's some people on the call who also know subjective indicators. So that's a question of whether that would be a different aspect than your life satisfaction at present, but some kind of, aspiration or hope. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just respond quickly and say, yeah, that could be one of the interpretations of it. It's still a little bit more just plain temporal. You can have great hope and know that based on the past experiences that you're on a downward spiral. So the fact is that there's this stark difference between the reality of a situation and your attitude toward that situation. And the second one can be extremely important for well-being and for, I would argue, poverty and the ability to remove yourself from poverty. So maybe something else is being captured there, but maybe there is overlap. Rizwan.
I mean, this is, I don't know if I should, the discussion might be, taken from a different angle. But the thing is that when we look at subjective versus objective indicators, so the thing is, if you look at a subjective, what's your perceptions about different things? So, and for the objective ones, what you have. So sometimes, there is kind of attainability sort of aspect is also there. So if you think that certain things can be attained, so what's your opinion about that particular things? And if you think that these things are not attainable, then they are altogether, you have different perspective about that. So again, there are different, as I said earlier in my presentation, so from different schools of thoughts, there are different definitions of well-being. How would you like to measure it? So psychology is there, sociology is there, economists are always everywhere. So that's why well, we have to look into that from which discipline we are talking about. So that makes a huge difference. I mean, from economic perspective, it might be mainly objective measures. What do you have? The tangible things, sort of things. That's why we have to look into that from which discipline. For interdisciplinary things, we have to plug in the life satisfaction, the subjective nature of things, and objective. We have to combine them. And that's why if you combine the well-being with the, as I said, that for the global MPI, that might be a bit, off in a way from acute poverty and well-being, because well-being is on the other side of the ladder in a way that you are attaining lots of things. You have to have sufficient the sufficiency level be at a particular level to be you are enjoying well-being, and whereas acute poverty is the deprivation. So that's why it is being plugged together with moderate MPI, and so it's a trade-off between that for not to say that to make everybody happy, but it's a trade-off, and we are working at the interdisciplinary things. So we have to have objective and subjective questions, and we have to combine them.
Right. So, yes, there's a chat or Q&A option for participants, correct? And I don't think we've been receiving any Q&A, so we'll just turn around and look at the beautiful world around us and say thank you so much, Rizwan, for your fine presentation. Thanks for the discussion of such an important question. And
I have a question, James. Sorry to interrupt you. I have a question to you. Do you think that we should, extend the analysis for whichever countries for the mix we have to have analysis for all those countries and do some experiments on different, like Sabina said, different weights, different options we have. Like you said, that we have to combine perhaps rebate, security and life satisfaction, or we have to combine them in one dimension. So playing with the numbers and different things and include other mixed countries. And then we have a bunch of, to make a case that we can have a cross-country analysis, and the data availability should be there to include different countries, more countries.
I'll just respond from a theorist's point of view. I would have a toolkit for being able to compare the two, the overlaps, and so on. If you have a toolkit that allows you to say, here's our method for comparing when we add this in and when we don't have it, and make sense of that change for the readers to understand what it is you're adding in and what is not being added in a very precise way, then yeah, it would be quite useful to explore this change. But until you do that, I think that you'll maybe have more questions than answers from the exercise, from my point of view. But Sabina, you may have another point of view. I see her shaking her head.
No, I think this is an area for exploration, and I think it's really too early to tell. So playing around and seeing how things come out empirically is part of the learning process for me. So I'd be inclined to go in that direction, but not have a status of it until we really get clear on what. I guess the concern is that if subjective responses are due to cultural factors, to personality factors, being optimistic and extroverted, then their comparability across time and across regions is, questionable. And so there might be these features, and the intercorrelations across subjective indicators are often higher than their intercorrelation with their respective objective indicator because of the personality filter or something. And so I think there are a lot of complexities in analyzing them that I am not comfortable with yet. But I think trying to play and trying to just put some of these questions out in the open would be useful going forward.
All right. Well, Rizwan, do you want to have one final word, or should we bring it to a close?
Thanks a lot, James, and thanks, Sabina, for your inputs. And I'll improve the paper, and hopefully we will have a detailed version of that.
Well, all right. Well, from beautiful downtown Tucson, Arizona, and from Thailand and Oxford, that's it for today. Thank you, all of you, for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
Bye. Bye. Bye, everyone. Thank you. Oh, it's checking in. Oh, actually, there are some questions. Do you mind staying a little bit longer? We've got a comment from Antonio Claret. Hi, Antonio. It's important to have this discussion, subjective indicators in the light of Amartya Sen's adaptive references concept. Thank you for that. And then another comment from participant. Is there anywhere this global wellbeing index is disaggregated into the 5 dimensions? I would like to see if the security and level of satisfaction are a driver of MPI. Okay.
Yes. So this is what's in progress, and definitely that's what we have to. That's the next thing I have to do.
Great. So that's covered. Yeah. No. Lovely. Okay.
And you know what? This is the most interesting seminar I've been in because it continues to end and begin. End to begin. End is the beginning, alpha, omega. All right. Well, so until next time, bye-bye.